I'm Eitan Weinstein.
And I'm Naor Menninger. And you're listening to Two Nice Jewish Boys.
This podcast is made in collaboration with the Jewish Journal.
Behold, blessed is the one whom God reproves. Therefore despise not the discipline of the Almighty, for he wounds, but he binds up, he shatters, but his hands heal. That's Job chapter 5, verses 17 and 18. Why did God strike Job time and time again? Was it because he wanted to win a bet with Satan? Or maybe it was a test for Job's faith? Or maybe there is no earthly reason why, and we humans are doomed to suffer through life's agonies with the notion that we will never understand God's intentions. But then how do we go on? Where do we gather the strength from? When you think about Yehuda Glick's life story, you can't help but wonder what his answers to these questions might be. Yehuda was born in the U.S. and made Aliyah in 1974. For decades, he was involved in politics and social activism, and he devoted many years from his life to the struggle of Jewish access for prayer on the Temple Mount. But Glick's life has taken quite a few twists and turns in recent years. Since 2014, he survived an assassination attempt, he became a Knesset member, he was widowed from his wife, and recently he lost in the primaries for the next Knesset. What does God want from Yehuda Glick? Since we weren't able to book the Almighty himself, we got the next best person to answer the question. Member of Knesset, Yehuda Glick, thank you for joining us. How are you?
Baruch Hashem, thank God, Shalom, and I think that if you thought you were interviewing God's spokesman, then I'm not the one. I can't speak for him, but...
For Yehuda Glick, you can speak, though.
I can try to speak for Yehuda Glick. I can tell you that you skipped some good parts, and that's a month and a half ago I remarried. And
Mazal tov.
So there are so many good things that are happening in this life also. Not only that, I think I can't, as I say, can't speak for God, but I can tell you that in Hebrew, the table that a woman gives birth on is called mashber. The Hebrew word mashber means crisis. So which tries to tell us that crises are a very good potential for a new birth, and I think that I've been accompanied by God personally through my life entirely, and He's really taken me on a wonderful journey, and I've had the privilege of contributing to the wonderful phenomena called redemption that we are privileged to be living through right now. And I'm very happy that I had the privilege of being part of one of these greatest godly phenomena in the history of mankind.
So we want to get to the positives, and we'll definitely talk about that. But let's start with one must have been a turning point in your life, the day of the assassination. Can you tell us what you remember from that day?
I remember it very well. I remember the whole day, as a matter of fact. I remember the preparations for the event we had that evening in the Begin Center in Jerusalem. We had an event called Israel Returning to Temple Mount. We had several hundred people who participated, and we were there were rabbis there were politicians there, and it was really a wonderful event. There were Christians, Muslims who were speaking up for the return to Temple Mount. And at the end of the event, it was like 10 p.m., where my wife came over to pick me up. I walked out of the event after everybody went home. I was one of the organizers, so we were like collecting the material at the end of the event, and I walked over to the car where my wife was waiting for me. And there I was approached by a gentleman on a motorcycle who point blank shot me 4 bullets to the center of my body.
Did he say anything before?
Yeah, he said actually, to my surprise, he first said, "I'm sorry." Then he said, "You are an enemy of Al-Aqsa." And then he shot me. He as I said, I remember the exact shot. I remember looking at him. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know when he approached me. But I do strongly have a strong memories of the bullets and the bleeding.
How does it
And
feel like?
To my surprise, there was no pain. There was a lot of bleeding. I managed to stagger like 20 yards and to collapse. Then he drove away, and then my two friends who were with me came over to me and started treating me. And one of them said to me, Rabbi Yehuda, we need you, don't go. And then I realized that my situation is a serious condition. And then shortly after that, I lost conscious. And I woke up 10 days later in the intensive care unit of the hospital, Shaare Tzedek Hospital.
And when you wake up, how long does it take you to realize what happened?
No, I woke up, I knew what happened. I didn't realize that it was 10 days later. I thought it was the next day. I didn't realize I had gone through 9 different kinds of surgery in those 10 days. But I realized I knew exactly what was going on with me. Unfortunately, I was not able to talk, but I was corresponding, writing, and I heard my family talking to me. And it was just not a simple, not simple. The rehabilitation, the curing, the healing, but I knew that I was in good hands.
It's nothing, I mean, short of a miracle, considering the condition that you were in. But when you look back, I wonder when you look back on, because you said that you remember this guy's face.
Yeah.
And when you look back at those moments and you remember him, he was shot and killed in the pursuit of him when
Right, that night.
That night. But when you remember him, what kind of feelings does it spark in you?
Look, now that I know who he is and who he was and what he stood for, I'm happy that he's not around anymore. Unfortunately, he misunderstood the message that we stand for. I think he shooting me, trying to do it for the sake of Islam. I can tell you that the Muslim surgeon who operated on me and the Muslim nurse who took care of me did much more for Islam than he did. I think that those who try to be exclusive, claiming that the only way to worship God is their way, and anybody who wants to worship God in any other way, there's no other legitimate way to worship God, and you have a right to kill somebody else for not worshiping God your way. I think that's something we definitely have to do whatever we can to prevent. But I'm happy that I'm alive and continuing, and that he's not.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk a bit about the cause that you still are working to progress, the Temple Mount. Can you tell us what the organization that you're a member of does? And
okay, at the time, I was a member of the organization called Temple Mount Heritage Foundation. Today, I'm a member of Knesset, but I'm in the process of establishing a foundation called the Shalom Jerusalem Foundation, which really looks at Jerusalem as the eyeball, the center of the world, and understanding that the phenomena of the people returning of the people of Israel back home has a impact on the entire world, and that God chose the people of Israel not for the sake of the people of Israel, but for the sake of the world. And we are to be a light to the nations, and we're to be there, offer any kind of aid we can to anybody in the world, but also invite the peoples of the world to connect. And the place which represents that more than anything else is the place chosen by God, the venue of the first and second temple, the venue that God refers to in the Bible as the place He chose to rest His divine presence. And God's name is Shalom, which means way beyond just peace or a matter of tolerance or no war, but more a matter of inclusiveness, a matter of diversity, a matter of a house of prayer for all nations, and each nation praying to God in their way. And therefore the Temple Mount, which in the past was a world center for incitement and hate, should become a world center for inclusiveness, diversity, religious tolerance, a world center for shalom.
What's the current problem, though? I mean, what's the struggle about for people who don't know?
For the last 50 years after Israel returned back to Jerusalem and to the Temple Mount, we've allowed the Muslims to run the Temple Mount.
Why?
Part of our Jewish characteristics of believing that if we are tolerant for others, then they will be open-minded for you. And unfortunately, again and again, it's been proven to be wrong. And therefore, the only way to turn the Temple Mount into a world center of inclusiveness is if it's in the hands of the sovereignty of the State of Israel. And that's what we're trying to do, is to encourage people to come to Temple Mount, Jews and non-Jews, to remove from the Temple Mount anybody who believes in violence or anybody who legitimizes any kind of violence or terror or harassment or hate or incitement, and to encourage those who really want to genuinely worship God to come to Temple Mount, to turn the Temple Mount into a house of prayer for all nations, as it should be.
And would you say it's true that for the most part, many Muslims or most Muslims believe that only Muslims should be allowed to pray there, and that's the main obstacle?
Many Muslims believe that, and
most?
I don't think most Muslims don't really care about the Temple Mount.
Okay.
But many Muslims, especially those living here in Israel, believe that the Temple Mount is a place that should be only for Muslims. But
and they're willing to do anything to prevent, basically.
I don't think they're willing to do anything to prevent, and I don't think in the status quo, because we're not talking about the status quo. We see that quite often the Muslims try to change the status quo to their direction. But look, billions of people around the world who believe in the Bible, Jews and non-Jews, refer to the Temple Mount as the most sanctified place in the world. And you can't allow that only one religion should take over. As I was speaking about before, that you can't allow a situation where if you don't do it my way, I can kill you. And therefore, I'm happy that in the last few years we've seen a process that Israel has removed from the Temple Mount those who were promoting violence, the Northern Islamic movement, the radical Murabitan and Murabitat, who were actually encouraging violence on Temple Mount.
So, what would the Temple Mount look like under Jewish or Israeli rule? It would be just would there be a synagogue there? Would it be would it be a room where anybody could come and worship? Would there be a Torah?
Look, as I said before, the Temple Mount is not something which is disconnected from reality. In the past 70 years, the people of Israel have returned back home to their homeland after 2,000 years of exile. After a few years earlier, there was an attempt to totally erase the people of Israel from the face of the earth in the final solution. And in the 70 years that we've been here, we've established a modern state, a state that is playing on the courts of the bigs. We're the fourth country to send a spaceship to the moon, and we're, according to the last research...
Still needs to land, but...
okay, but...
Small detail.
Yeah, but first of all, the attempt to send it also is one thing. But the other thing is, and that is, we are considered the 8th strongest country in the world. We are way beyond proportional to our size. The way the world is being interested in what's going on in Israel, the United Nations. The Prime Minister of Israel meets with the leaders of India, Japan, China, United States, Brazil, Russia, all over. And you know, we're only a small 8 million people, a population of 8 million, and that shows that we're on the table. The world hasn't yet decided whether to recognize our capital, not to recognize our capital. And that means that we play a central role in this world. And the Temple Mount is the core of the whole thing. The return of the Jewish people back to Israel is called the Zionist movement, and Zion is the name of the Temple Mount. And we have to make sure that these great things that are happening to the people of Israel are not something that are only for the sake of the people of Israel. We have to make sure that the world benefits from these achievements that Israel has achieved in the past 70 years. And I think that if we look at it from a faithful perspective, The Temple Mount represents God's presence in this world, and Israel, being a light to the nations, can connect people from all over the world to the book of the people, to the land of the people, to the word of God, and to the morality and ethics that the book represents.
At any price, though. What if?
But I'm sorry, I have to interrupt because I don't think I got an answer. And I just want to press you on it for a second because I want to understand what the Temple Mount would look like I'm 99% sure it would be more inclusive than what it is today. But I'm just wondering, like, let's say tomorrow we get the Temple Mount. What is it going to look like? How is it?
I'll tell you why you're not getting an answer from me. A very simple reason.
Okay.
If I would approach Theodor Herzl in 1897 when the first Zionist Congress got together, and I said, "Listen, what is Israel going to look like?" Would he know about superhighways? Would he know about Intel? Would he know about the media that were? These are things that develop. It's not a static thing. It's a dynamic thing. The Temple Mount will be a house of prayer for all nations. How it will happen? All the nations will decide together. It's not a private initiative by a private organization that I will establish, and it's not going to have a sign. Yehuda Glick's donated the marble for the faucets. It's going to be something which is much more great than that. And when it happens, I don't know exactly where the air conditioners are going to be, and I don't know what solar system they're going to use. All of those details are so minor. The idea and the concept is what's important. We're going to have to learn to share. We're going to have to learn to turn the place into a place which represents faith in God. And the faith in God and the God of the Bible is the God of Shalom. And he's the God who has a message to the entire world. And he doesn't want us all to be the same. He wants us to be different. And therefore he knocked down the Babylonian temple, Babylonian tower, which represented everybody being the same. No, he wants us all to be different. But although we're all different, we're all worshiping God. And we're all part of one big concert, one big orchestra, one diverse harmony, symphony. And you don't go to a concert to see the trumpet and say, wow, the trumpet was right. You go to a concert to see the way the violin and the drum and the cello, each one of them balance the other one. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for one big harmony. We're looking for one call in the name of God, an inclusive God.
But in your journey to harmony, Third Intifada could start, war could start, World War maybe could start. And I'm asking you, what's the red line, and is it worth any price? Your goal, is your goal worth anything? Any means necessary?
I don't refer to that question as a legitimate question, and I'll answer you why. A few years ago, there was a terror attack in a newspaper in France. Charles Charlie Hebdo. Charlie Hebdo. They were there for talking for freedom of speech. You can say, is freedom of speech so important that you're willing that people will be killed because of freedom of speech? The answer is no. But those who the terror they attacked didn't have because of freedom of speech. It happened because the terrorists who shot them. And you have to remember, if terror occurs because of what I just spoke about, it's not because of what I just spoke about. It's because of the terrorists. And no terrorist will ever get up in the morning and say, listen, I'm a terrorist. Terrorists will always blame the victim. It's like the guy who says, I'll never beat up my wife if she doesn't deserve it. Okay, so you don't say the wife is to be blamed that she was beaten up, and the victim is not to be blamed for the rape, and therefore the same thing I'm saying right now. I am speaking legitimately. I'm talking about tolerance and inclusiveness. I'm talking about peace. If anybody breaks that and kills people in the name of that, he's not killing, the idea, the morality is not the one in charge of the killing. It's the terrorists and the killers who are trying.
In an ideal world, I totally agree with you. Thing is, though, sometimes in our world, in reality, terror wins. For example, Charlie Hebdo. In that example, terror won. Charlie Hebdo became almost on the brink of bankruptcy.
But the question was not about Charlie Hebdo. The question was, does that mean has freedom of speech been shut down in the world, Or we
no,
seen
but
more?
it's been
Or do we see
harmed in
more?
France.
Do we see more freedom of speech in the world or not? Do we see? I think that the Charlie Hebdo the following week came out instead of in 35,000 copies, it came out in 2 million. So I'm not sure who won there.
I think
I
in
think
Europe
that-
people think twice before they would publish something like that. So terror won. I'm not saying it's awful,
I don't.
but it's reality. So
I
my
don't
question to you is, what if? Do you deny that a third intifada is a possibility? It's a possible outcome
I think
to
that, yes.
annexing?
I think that if we, God forbid, keep ourselves away from Temple Mount, we may witness a third intifada, and therefore we have to make sure not to run away from them. I'll take another example, okay?
Yeah.
15 years ago, there was an area called the Gaza Strip. There were 1.5 million Muslims living there, 5,000 Jews, and there were missiles falling on the Jewish settlements. And the world told us, listen, for what price are you going to do it? Let's uproot those 5,000 villages, and you'll see Gaza will turn into Singapore. We uprooted those villages, and ever since we uprooted the villages, not one missile has fell down on any of those villages, but the missiles have gone to Tel Aviv, to Ashdod, and because the end is very simple. When you run away from terror, you're encouraging terror. When the terror has benefits, if we, God forbid, prevent Jews and say no, because of the threat, let's keep Jews away from Temple Mount, the terror will say, wow, great, we want the Temple Mount, let's go on, and we'll keep Jews away from Jerusalem, and let's keep away Jews from the Galilee, and let's keep away Jews from the world at all. You don't give in to terror. If you give in to terror, you encourage more terror. If you build, if you continue coming to Temple Mount, and I'm happy that we've overcome terroristic events on Temple Mount. When I began ascending Temple Mount, there were 100 Jews who ascended annually. Now we have 35,000 Jews. The violence has gone down by so much, and that's the answer. The answer is never give in to terror. Giving in to terror encourages the third intifada.
Wait, could you give us those numbers again? Because I missed them, and I just want to...
When I started ascending Temple Mount in 1989, we had 100 Jews annually on Temple Mount. In 2018, we had 35,000 Jews. You want to give another number? In 2014, there were 200,000 tourists who ascended Temple Mount. In 2018, 670,000. 670,000. And it's been more and more quiet. And we can't give in. The more we have to
670,000
tourists who are non-Muslim visited Temple
in
Mount
2018.
in 2018 and 200,000 in 2014.
But
Those are the official
non-Jewish also?
numbers. No, I'm not talking about the Jewish.
Tourists.
Tourists who are non-Muslims.
Okay.
Tourists who are non-Muslims. The Temple Mount has become more and more...
Yet still, if you're a Jew and you go to the Temple Mount, you aren't allowed to pray.
Okay, those are
Right?
things we have to change.
No, we are trying to, because the
We're
listeners
trying-
might not know
We're
what's
trying to change that situation. That's
So-
a sad situation.
So to give our listeners just a bit of a background, the Waqf, right, controls the Temple Mount currently. And basically, if you're a Jew and you go, the people that are in charge there will stop you if they notice you praying.
Yeah, but that'll change by the more, if right. I said in 2018 we had 35,000 Jews. When we get to 100,000, 200,000, 500,000, that'll change, and that's the way things change. I don't believe in changes that happen in one day. Yes, the Muslims were used to the fact that Temple Mount was only in their hands, and they could make decisions about what goes on there. I believe that that's not going to continue that way.
I see. And who's carrying the torch? I mean, now, as we mentioned in the intro, you aren't going to be continuing in the Knesset. Is that true?
For the time being.
Right, probably right.
Will you come
but,
back, though? You will try again?
No, I'm not sure. I'm ready to go on to the next step. I'm ascending in all levels, and I wish and I hope, as I said before, to establish the Shalom Jerusalem Foundation, which will be something much greater than just the Knesset. It will be something that will talk to the entire world, Jewish world, Christian world, Muslim world, to the entire world, because I think that the message of the return of the Jewish people back to Israel is a global message.
What do you think about Moshe Feiglin, who also supports your causes, and they say he's going to be the surprise of the next elections?
I certainly wish him lots of luck. He's a very close friend of mine. I support many of the things he believes in. I share many ideas that he does. And I think if he makes it to the next Knesset, it will definitely be a very positive development.
Just a last question about this, and then we move on. To many Israelis, not the most, but to many, a good amount, they would consider you, Feiglin, as a bunch of crazy people.
In the end of the 19th century, mass majority, 99% of the Jews in the world thought that Herzl was a crazy guy. And I'm sure the Zionist movement, when they began, they were a bunch of weirdos. They were peculiar, and that the Orthodox were against them, the Reform were against them, the Socialists were against them, everybody was against them. Who are you? What are you guys, crazy? Jews can establish their own country? Are you out of your mind? Let me tell you another thing. In the beginning of the 20th century, the feminist people were also pretty weirdos. What? Women can vote? Women can drive? Women can be CEOs? Women can be professors? Women can be mayors? You're crazy. The only way to make changes if you're willing to be called crazy. And as I said, all of these things have to happen only in legitimate ways, only by following the law, but only by faith and believing that the world is dynamic, and we can't continue on doing things just because that's the way we've been doing them till yesterday.
So you were outside of the Knesset, you served now for a period, and now you're speaking about the foundation that you're going to continue with after. Do you think that you, from your experience over these past couple of years, do you feel like there's more, you have a better ability to influence from within the system or from outside?
Both. I did a lot in my 2.5 years in the Knesset, and I'm very happy I was here, and I felt it really a privilege to be here. I was honored to be here, and I liked what I did here. And I think that my next step I'll do outside. I mean, the world consists of doctors and shoemakers, and I don't think you can ask me who does more. Those who sell in the supermarkets, or those the cleaning ladies, or the chemists. Everybody has his part in the world, and I think that I wouldn't like to talk about who's more important and where can you do more. Everybody fits himself into the slot at that certain time in life.
What's the achievement from the last 2.5 years you're most proud of?
I'm very proud of the legislations I did of the anti-smoking legislations, which brought Israel way ahead of where it was.
Recent, very recent.
Very recent. Yeah, it took 2.5 years to do that, almost from day one in the Knesset, and we completed it the final last day of the recent Knesset. I was very much involved in a lot of dialogue groups, in dialogue between Jews and Christians, Jews and Muslims, dialogue between religious and non-religious Jews, dialogues between Israel and the society and the diaspora Jewry. I was involved. So these are things that I really believe in. I believe that I made an impression also in terms of optimism. I think that people were used to, a few years ago, always kvetching, complaining, blaming. And I think I added to some different kind of attitude of looking at the positive things of world. I can't, not everything can be measured with a ruler, but with a yardstick. But I think that I've done a lot, and of course I've done a lot in the Temple Mount issue. As I said before, we outlawed the terror organizations that were working on Temple Mount. And as I said, I believe we're going to continue this wonderful work in the future. I'll be out of the Knesset, and others will be in the Knesset.
Aren't you afraid now to go back to your to doing things for Temple Mount after the assassination attempt? I mean, I would be really scared walking in the streets. It's traumatizing.
You think that the smokers are going to try to assassinate me? Okay,
it's actually
maybe.
Don't give ideas to anyone.
If you're always afraid of what you're doing,
no, but also Muslims
okay,
again can be pissed at you.
I'm not afraid. I do what I believe, and I am determined to do what I believe. I take the precautions needed, but you can't stop doing things because of being afraid of threats. You have to do what you believe. And that's the way it is in the democratic world. Thank God Israel is a democratic country. And I will continue doing what I believe is right, and I don't think that what I believe is something that's totally disconnected from the reality.
So, I think about a year ago, you lost your wife to after she struggled
January
with
1st, yeah,
January 1st.
2018.
You lost your wife after she was struggled for how long with disease?
She was 6 months out of conscious, but she was for 2 years. Suffering post-trauma.
And that, I mean, must have hit you pretty hard. This
Yeah.
was your first wife,
My first wife,
and you had been together for
26 years.
26 years.
Yeah.
So how do you cope with? I mean, how many children do you have?
We have 8 children.
8 children.
How many of them are
7
redheads?
grandchildren. Actually, none of them. One of them is redhead, but actually,
Really?
when I say we have 8, it's also not exact. The first 2 are my wife's. Before we got married, she was a widow.
Mm-hmm.
Then 4 we had together, and then we had 2 girls that we adopted.
Uh-huh.
So
Wow.
we have 8 children altogether.
So how do you cope with such a loss after? I mean,
It was
almost
very
30
difficult.
years together.
It was very, very difficult. It was very painful. It was, as I said, I went through many, many months of being alone and striving and going through days of reminding myself of the wonderful years we had together. And thank God, as I said, thank God a month and a half ago I got married again to a lovely wife, Hadass.
How'd you meet her?
So the first 25 years of my life, of my marriage, were wonderful years, and we were very wonderful together, and they're still part of my life, and they've not been erased. And now, as I said, I'm meeting with Hadass. I actually met her part of my activity here in the Knesset.
Really?
Yeah, she established an organization called Amitzim, which is the translated into brave, but it's also an abbreviation in Hebrew for Almanot Yetomim Tzirim. And she actually deals till this very day with helping or empowering and strengthening widows and orphans, not those who were lost their beloved ones in wars or in terror, just widows and orphans from cancer, heart attacks, suicide, car accidents, people dropping dead, etc., etc. And pretty much many of them you lose your protection, you lose your backbone, and that's what losing a parent or losing a mate is all about. And she is trying to uplift those. She develops workshops where they discuss their situation together and they meet together. She gives out scholarships for those, and she's mainly trying to empower those. And she came here to the Knesset to try to promote her activity. And
One thing led to another.
One thing led to another.
But, I can't help but think about in Fiddler on the Roof, there's a scene where Tuvia, after blow, he looks up at the sky and he plainly asks God,
What do you want from my life?
What do you want? Did you have such a moment?
No, maybe it's also has to do with characteristics of a person. In general, I'm a very optimistic person. Maybe because I buy my glasses at the optometrist. If I would buy my glasses at the pessimetrist, maybe I would be pessimistic. But I believe that it doesn't mean that you don't have agony. It doesn't mean you don't go through very difficult times. But when you deep inside, you really have the faith that God knows what He's doing, and that everything's there to move things ahead. And really, as I said, I was accompanied by God's hand personally every single day. But when I look back at the state of Israel and the world, what's going on in the past century, you can't not see the hand of God. And when you see the hand of God and you know that there's somebody there who's guiding things, then you can't lose hope. And you just look, what's your next job? What strength, what energy is going to come out of the days of agony and the days of suffering. and that's what
Keeps you going.
That's what it has to keep you going. The other alternative is sinking into this depression or despair.
Okay, that's so inspiring. Thank you so much, Yehuda. Before we go, we have a collaboration with the Jewish Journal. It's a Jewish news outlet in Los Angeles, jewishjournal.com. You guys should check them out.
Okay, I'm going to be in Los Angeles in May, in the very first week of May.
Can people, do you do talks and stuff like that?
Yeah, I'll be talking. You can contact me on and I'll be happy to meet with you in my next visit to Los Angeles.
You're on social media, right?
I'm on social media. We can't hide.
Twitter,
you
Facebook.
can find me Twitter, Facebook, Skype, email,
Snapchat.
No, I'm not Snapchat, not in. And I even have Instagram, everything you want. But I think the easiest way is to find me on Facebook or Twitter, or just WhatsApp. You can find me. You can't hide these days. You can't say no, Daddy's not home. He'll be home next week. Doesn't work that way.
Cool. So if you want to meet with Yehuda,
meet with me
go to his talks.
if you want to meet with me in Los Angeles, come to my talks in Los Angeles. I'll be there in the very first week of May. I'll be more than happy to meet with people. Anybody who wants to really share the vision of Shalom Jerusalem Foundation ideas, more than happy to meet anybody and to really cooperate with anybody who wants to believe in what we're doing.
And the organization you were part of before,
Temple Mount Heritage Foundation.
And they're still running?
They're still running.
Okay.
And
donations, they accept donations.
Whatever, they accept donations. And they said, Shalom Jerusalem Foundation, Temple Mount Heritage Foundation, Amitzim, anybody we have what to do, we can connect. But really, we're trying to make a large connection to the world, to connect to the people of the book, to the land, the people of the land, to Jerusalem, to the Temple Mount. We're here.
All the buzzwords.
Anybody who wants to be an ambassador for Israel, for God, for Jerusalem, I'll be happy to connect you.
Great. Thank you. We also, before we go, we do this on our free time, guys. So if you want to throw a few shekels our way, you can go to 2njb.com/donate. We also accept donations. Thank you so much for joining us and taking your time.
Take care of yourself.
Thank
Best
you very
of luck.
much.
And
Mazal Tov.
Mazal Tov.
You can actually find me on our website, jerusalemofpeace.com.
jerusalemofpeace.com.
We'll put a link.
Yep.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.